In the ancient world, gods and religions spread through the interaction of different civilizations. Ishtar was imported from Mesopotamia to the eastern Mediterranean and became the Canaanite goddess Astarte. As the Canaanites splintered into various groups, their gods were further transformed. The Phoenicians brought Astarte to the Greeks, in which she became Athena. They also gave the Greeks Melkart, their protector deity, who first became Heracles and then Hercules, once the Romans took over the Greeks. The Canaanite gods of Baal, El, and Yahweh represented different tribes that either merged or splintered. We know the storm god Yahweh came from Mesopotamia and merged with the storm god El, while the Phoenician storm god Baal became a false deity, according to other Canaanite tribes. Interactions like war, politics, trade, and immigration determined which religions continued and which would die out. Have you even read your holy book or wondered where your religion comes from, how you were born into the right religion and everybody else is wrong? Do you know where it comes from? Whether it's Yahweh and his son Jesus, Zeus and Heracles, Osiris and Horus, Baal and Melkart, why did so many gods have children who often traveled to the underworld or represent seasonal change, fertility, and agriculture? Equally fictional and not all unique, these fairy tales have much in common because they were created by the human mind that was trying to explain life and order society. As people spread, so did their ideas. As people changed, so did their stories. We are all connected through our human experiences, and we should not complicate that with mythology. Did you know that Israelis and Palestinians both come from the Canaanites, or that people in North Africa and Southern Europe are genetically linked to one another? None of us are special because of our religions. We are all simply the same. Do you disagree with what I'm saying? Please call me and tell me why, because the show is starting now. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us on this lovely Sunday. You could be anywhere you want to be, but you're here with us. And it is Sunday, February 25th, 2024. I am Jimmy Jr. Joining me today is the one and only, I am contractually obligated to say that because he's my boss, Richard Gilliver. Richard, how the heck are you?
I am very, very well. I have spent the last week on TikTok. I made the mistake on TikTok of responding to a post where somebody claimed that the bones of giants had been found, and this proved that the Bible was true. And I made the mistake of commenting on that, simply saying that the Bible in and of itself is a demonstration of truth without external evidence. Thus far, I have had over 6,000 responses to that comment. Most of which are simply telling me that I'm wrong. So if you are one of those 6,000 people who has responded to that post, don't just tell me I'm wrong. Call the show and give us an actual argument for why I'm wrong. Because one of my pet hates is people in the comment sections of anything just telling you what they think and then refusing to back it up with anything. So give us a call. Don't be a coward. Just give us a call.
Yeah, maybe they were just telling you were wrong to premise their call that they were eventually going to make. And today could be the day. So I'm hoping to hear from them. We do have open lines, but we do have some callers waiting for us. I do want to remind everybody that this is Talk Heathen, a product of the atheist community of Austin. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. We're a live call-in show. Like I said, plenty of open lines, but we've got some callers we want to take. Before I get into that, I want to do really what we're here for, right? And that is Talk Heathen to me. This is the highlight of our show. No, just kidding. The highlight's going to come when we get those great calls in. But I do want to go over some of the responses that we got to last week's question. We asked you what really is going on in purgatory. And here are our top 3 answers. So number 3 comes from Colin Matz. What's really going on in purgatory? Wing fitting, of course. I don't know. Wing fitting. Do people die and get wings in purgatory? Oh, no, excuse me. Right. They go to purgatory first, then they go to heaven. That's right. But what if, can people go to purgatory and then end up going to hell anyway? Is that how that works? I don't think so.
I don't know. Isn't it a waiting area?
Yeah,
It's not even a thing anymore. Hasn't the Pope decided that he can override God and it's not a thing anymore?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Pope can change anything he wants, right? So yeah, for a couple thousand years or a little over 1,000 years, purgatory was real. No more though. No more, folks. So looks like you're not getting fitted for wings there. Number 2 comes from Kevin McLean 5137. What's really going on in purgatory is Ben Stein calling your name over and over. Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. For all the folks who are not familiar with the 80s hit Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the teacher who was calling Bueller is Ben Stein, who went on to be the host of Ben Stein's Money. But I think he's actually like a pretty regarded, scientist or something. I don't really know too much about him, but I do know he's famous for the Bueller line. So yeah, that would actually be hell for me. I don't know if it would be purgatory. I don't know. Richard, any thoughts on that? Are you familiar with that show, that movie? No, huh?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm unfamiliar. I'm blissfully ignorant of this one, and by the sounds of it, happily so. yeah.
You're not missing anything, honestly. But number 1 comes from Andars. What happens in purgatory stays in purgatory. I like that one. I like that one a lot. So, purgatory. I don't know what was going on when it was a thing, but I guess we'll never know. So that's going to do it for us. Richard, what do you think about those?
I like those. I'm intrigued by the last one. I'm sure I read somewhere, I can't remember exactly, but I'm sure it was an Islamic thing. And I'm sure it read that the people who were going to heaven were on some kind of stairway where they could look down at the people in purgatory and kind of see what they were going through, which I always found a really interesting concept.
Yeah, well, purgatory is, of course, one of those things that was created to give people hope. If you were a really crappy person, man, there's still a way for you. There's still a way. We can get you into purgatory. Just keep giving us your money, right? You'll still go to heaven eventually, but you're going to have to do some time in the waiting area. And I guess it was effective, but honestly, how can we prove any of this stuff? I'm waiting for the proof to come through. So we have a prompt for next week, folks. The prompt is, what's a holy scripture that lives rent-free in your head? Before I tell you how you can give us those answers, I need to hear Richard's.
Yeah, this was not a hard one for me at all. Numbers 31. Of all the scriptures, it's the one that's the most vile and requires the most twisting and excusing God being the monster he is in the Bible. And I will often hear Christians say about this, well, that's the Old Testament, like they do with the slavery thing. But it doesn't work here. Because unlike the slavery line, it's not a law that was given to people. It's an instruction given by God to slaughter people simply because they displeased God's massive ego and worshipped a different God. Even the hardest twisted apologetics on this chapter don't deny what's said, but rely entirely on speculation about what isn't. And here's an example of that. The virgin girls who were taken as spoils of war weren't slaves. That would have broken the law. They had to marry their captors. That's a real apologetic. That's something somebody has come up to excuse that. It's okay because they wouldn't be taken as slaves. They would have been forced to marry their captors. Here's another one. It's brilliant. If they didn't want to marry their captors, their feelings would have been taken into account. Yeah, really? I don't think so. Absolute nonsense. Utter speculation with nothing but trying to desperately twist God out of being the absolute monster he is to justify it. And this right here is the poison of Christianity. And this is why this scripture will be forever etched in my brain as a reminder that God is evil and his followers will say anything, absolutely anything, to twist their way out of it. Jimmy.
Yes. Thank you. I have to reflect on something. We introduced the show. We started talking, or I did the intro talking about the similarities across the ancient world of these religions, right? And it's funny that you say God is being used to justify these horrible acts, because that was not uncommon and not unique to Judaism or Christianity by a long shot. There was this god in the Assyrian Empire. It was the god of justice, okay? And I think it was like Shashim or Shashira. It was an SH god, an SH name. In any case, no wonder this god always agreed that Sargon was allowed to take slaves from his enemies. I mean, always. Anytime that they were brought for trial before the god of justice, it was always in Sargon's favor. And he always got to keep whatever slaves he wanted. How convenient. How convenient. And, you know, it's just typical of seeing these deities used as a justification to commit horrible acts. And in fact, it's probably an underlying reason why they were created in the first place. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent. I know we got callers waiting for us, but thank you for that. Thank you for that awesome answer. Folks, if you want your answer read out, all you need to do is respond in the show comments with your answers, and next week we will read the top 3. So remember, what's a holy scripture that lives rent-free in your head? So like I said, want to get to some calls, but I am not going to do that without saying thank you and recognizing the folks that make this happen. We are going to cut to the crew cam. Yes. All right. Look at all those wonderful people making it work, allowing me to come here and taking the risk, you know, giving me an open mic and not knowing what the heck is going to come out of my mouth. So, you know,
I just want to add as well that, you know, we thank the crew every week, but it's everybody and everyone who volunteers from the ACA to the show note writers, the timestamp people, everybody. There is no weak position from the volunteers of the ACA. Everybody does an amazing job, and we're so thankful to all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, backing up our show today is the great Kelly Laughlin, waiting for an opportunity for something to go wrong so he can pop in and save the day. So thankful for him as well. He will be running the after show today, folks. So if you want to chat more after the show, stick around. Without further ado, we have a caller on the line, somebody who is calling back, called a few weeks ago. I invited him to call back this week because, well, Richard was, poised to take this question, and he wasn't with us 2 weeks ago. So we are going to talk to Adam, him in England, who wants to talk about the contingency argument. Adam, you're on the air with Jimmy and Richard.
Hi, Jimmy and Richard.
Hey.
Hello, Adam. I've been looking forward to this.
Like I said before, okay, cool. Yeah. Like I said before, I'm a Catholic, and I think that the contingency argument by Thomas Aquinas is valid and sound, and it establishes the existence of an eternal, omnipotent ground of reality. And there's a number of such arguments, but I like the one by Aquinas the most.
Can I start off by asking you why particularly Aquinas? Because in philosophy, that's kind of a bit an outdated one.
Just because of the way that it proceeds. So it starts off by describing the fact that we observe contingency as a relationship between things. Then there's a reductio ad absurdum in there, which allows us to infer that there exists some non-contingent entity. And then he establishes the relationship that has to eternity, and establishes that concludes basically that such a thing is comports with the existence of a God.
Okay, so in there is the allowance for the possibility of a universe that has no beginning and time in Aquinas' argument. So first of all, how do you kind of get around that one?
I would say that
Sorry, I thought you'd gone.
The allowance of a universe which has no beginning in time, because obviously they didn't have the concept of the Big Bang back in those days. That's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, and the argument allows for that. So how would you kind of make your way around that one and get to God from that?
I would say that the universe doesn't fit the definition of God, and I would say that the argument has a scope which encompasses the universe itself, but is not limited to the universe. So the universe would, on my interpretation, would be a contingent entity because it's contingent on certain abstract.
But if the universe is not beginning in time, it's not contingent. A contingent thing is something that is contingent on something else for its existence. So if it allows for a possibility for a universe that has no beginning, then that universe is definitionally not contingent.
Yeah, but we know that the universe did have a beginning in time.
It's irrelevant what we know. We're talking about Aquinas' argument. You know, as I've said, Aquinas' argument is considered like pretty outdated in philosophy now, but that's what we're talking about. That's what you find compelling. So that's the one we're talking about, and it does allow for the possibility of a universe that has no beginning. So how do you get around that difficulty within Aquinas' argument? It doesn't matter what we know now.
Well, I'd say that the argument doesn't make the hypothesis that the universe is eternal. So as long as it doesn't make such a hypothesis, we're not tied into the interpretation that it's the universe that's eternal.
That doesn't avoid the difficulty of it could be. It allows for it to be. And that's the objection I'm raising to you. Aquinas' argument allows that the universe could have no beginning. So how do you get over that objection?
Well, the point of the argument is that it has a wide scope, right? So all it's seeking to establish is that something is eternal. That the something that is eternal doesn't have to be the universe.
No, it doesn't have to be the universe. But I'm asking you how you get around the objection that it could be the universe.
Right. So, but if someone says that it could be the universe, we just know that to be false. The argument still holds because the point of the argument is
no, we don't know it to be false because we're talking about Aquinas' argument. We're not talking about a modern argument which proposes that the universe began. We're talking about Aquinas' argument, which, as you said, has a wide scope. It may not be the universe, but it is possible to be the universe. So how do you get over that objection? Because all I'm hearing at the moment, with respect, is, well, I don't think it's the universe. But how do you get over that as an objection that it could be the universe?
Right, but so the point of the argument is that there's like something is eternal. So if you respond by saying it could be the universe, well, the conclusion of the argument isn't committed into that conclusion.
I agree. That's why I'm asking you what you would say as to that as an objection to it. Because it could be the universe. We agree that it could be the universe, seemingly, but how, where are you stepping out of it could be the universe, that it's not the universe, it's something else?
Well, this is something that's not determined by the argument, whether or not it's the argument.
I know it's not determined, that's the argument. That's why I'm asking you kind of how you would deal with that objection to it. It's a wide scope. It allows for many things that could be eternal. What is your, if you're using this argument as something that you find compelling, how do you say definitively that it's not the universe? It's a legitimate objection to the argument.
I wouldn't say that it's an objection to the argument because the argument doesn't try to prove that it's the physical universe that is non-contingent or eternal. That's not a claim of the argument. The claim is that something is eternal, yeah?
Right. Something is eternal. The universe could be that thing. You personally, not the argument, but you personally, how would you get over that it could be the universe? Because to say, I'm quite happy to sit here and say Aquinas' argument is fine. There's no problem with it. There could be something that's eternal. That we could agree on that. That would be the end of the call. It'd be a very boring call, and it wouldn't get us any closer to God.
Well, if you're admitting that something is eternal, then that establishes that at least one thing has a property that God has. So I'd say it does get us closer. But so now you're asking me what would my
It doesn't matter if we're getting closer. We're making a deductive argument for God, aren't we? It doesn't matter if we're getting closer. It matters if the God is the conclusion. So how do you get over the objection of this eternality? Jimmy, jump in, please.
Yeah, well, if God is the conclusion, then how are we ascribing a property to it? Like, how are we saying, well, we know that something's eternal, and we know that God is eternal, therefore the thing that's eternal must be God, but we haven't established that God is there. And we need to first land on God as a conclusion before we can start ascribing properties to it. You know, it's the same thing as if we were to say, well, you know, God's a nice guy, or God's not so nice. God's eternal or God's not eternal. We need to conclude first before we move forward. And so I think what you're saying, and please forgive me if I'm wrong, I think you're positing Aquinas's argument, which is stating that the universe could be eternal, but then over time, right, we have determined that the universe essentially or theoretically began. Okay, so it's not eternal, right? So if it's not the universe, therefore God. That's what I think you're trying to say. So I'd like you to respond to that, but then pick back up with what Richard had to say.
Okay, so I'll respond to Jimmy first. So the argument doesn't try to conclude that it is that it's God. That God is not the conclusion of the argument. The argument is just that something is eternal, and I also interpret it to mean that something is also omnipotent, because by dint of what the contingency relationship is.
Where does that come from?
Yeah, you just threw that in there.
Why omnipotence suddenly jumped into it?
That's a new conclusion.
Okay, so if everything is contingent on some necessary entity, well, then the other side of that relationship is that the necessary entity has the power to actualize all of those contingent entities, right? Because they have a conditional dependency.
They have a conditional dependency on that thing, but that doesn't make it omnipotent. Doesn't make it all powerful. It means it is sufficient for that particular thing, which is contingency. That says nothing about anything else related to any other kind of power. It's simply that it has the power it is sufficient for that contingency of those things, contingent things. That is it. Omnipotent is just plucking something out your arse for that one. Where's that come from? Where in the argument is that suggested in any way whatsoever, outside of wishful thinking and special pleading?
All right, so let's.
And I'm sorry. Instead of in response to what I said, instead of not ascribing a property, you then ascribed a new one. So you didn't even take a step back. You took a step in a different direction and changed the conversation completely by adding that not only is this thing eternal, but it's also all powerful. So I just want to point that out.
Okay, so just putting things in simple terms, right? So if y is contingent on x, then this means that x is sufficient to actualize y, right? So x provides the condition by which y becomes actual. Well, that means that x has power over y. So if
yes, but it doesn't mean it's all powerful. It means it's sufficient for that particular thing. And this particular thing we're talking about is contingency. So that thing is sufficient for contingency. Stating all powerful is adding so many more layers onto that.
It is
my parents are sufficient for contingency with myself.
Is X being powerful over Y? Is that an accurate description, or does it just mean that X is required for Y? By what definition or what way are you using power? That X has power over Y.
Right. So if you say Y is a contingent entity, whereby its existence is contingent on X, well, that means that X provides the sufficient cause for Y. That's bringing that thing into actuality. That would be but
describing that as having power over it a much different characterization than just saying it needs to be there as the foundation for why to take place.
I mean, I'm happy, Jimmy, with his kind of with Adam's explanation of that, of it being sufficient and having power over it for that sufficiency. It's where the all power comes into it, the all spark. It's where the all power comes. I don't know why I said that. Sorry. It's where the all power comes into it, where I'm really, really, really struggling with this. So now on this front, on this question, we've got two major things that I'm struggling with. One is how you get over that this eternal thing might just be the universe, because you seem to be having to add something else on top of it to get to that. And the second one is how we've jumped from this sufficient thing, this thing being sufficient to start these contingent things, to being all powerful, which is it just seems to have been plucked out of nowhere. So these are the two major problems I've got with this argument you're making. I'll let Jimmy just have a quick word, and then I'll leave you to respond, Adam.
No, I think I want to hear this conversation between you two continue, please.
Okay, so Richard, so if you're agreeing that if y is contingent on x, then x can sufficiently actualize y, and that's an example of power. That's a way of describing power. Well, if every contingent entity, every contingent effect in existence ultimately terminates in the necessary entity, the non-contingent entity, well, that means that the non-contingent entity has power over all effects. So that would be all the power.
No, it doesn't. Why does it? Why does it mean that?
Bring all effects. Okay, so if something can bring all effects, it can bring all effects into actuality, then that thing has power over all effects, right? It has the power to bring any effect into existence, right?
No, not necessarily. It has the power, because the thing is, here's what we're saying here. Something is contingent. Now, contingent things can be contingent on other contingent things. I'm assuming we agree on that. So what we're saying is we've got this one necessary thing which has started this chain of contingent things. Now, that doesn't mean that this one contingent thing has the power to start over something, 1,000 contingent things down the line. And we see this with the universe itself. If we do take the Big Bang Theory into account, the universe began from a singularity. Now, at that point, the universe was infinitely dense and infinitely hot. And out of that came atoms. You wouldn't get a jump from the singularity forming the universe as we had it now. That would not be a possible thing. So just because it has power over the first contingent thing, it does not give it power over all contingent things that follow. We can actually demonstrate that with the universe we have. So how are you saying this thing is all powerful? It seems to me like you are special pleading it to be all powerful, because that is one of the qualities you want to give God. And that's why you're throwing it in there, but you're not demonstrating it.
Okay, let me explain how.
And I know that I know that I am hung up. I'm sorry, and Richard, I know that you're okay with the word power being implemented there, but I fail to see how that is an adequate characterization, because by putting the word power in there, that is how you're allowing yourself to jump to this term of all powerful and omnipotence. But let's change that, okay? You have, so far in this conversation, you and Richard have used the word sufficient. Could we say that the very first thing was all sufficient? No, I mean, we could say that, but that doesn't give your argument any validity, because what you're aiming for is the all-powerful argument. But if we change that word, then you lose that omnipotence. And so I can see why you would want to hang your hat on this concept of power. For me, I just fail to see why that is something that is a good way of explaining something. Like my parents, right, I am contingent. My existence is contingent on them being together. That doesn't mean they have power over me, but their status as being living beings is sufficient. It's sufficient to create the conditions to where I and then created, if you will, or born, right? But that doesn't mean they have power over me. And that I'm just hung up on that because it speaks to this idea of the special pleading and of this characteristic you're trying to provide without really landing at the conclusion you need to first. So I'm hung up there. I'm not past that, but I'll allow you to continue. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll respond to Richard's point that some arbitrary point down the contingency series, if you select some given term of the series, then that is only contingent on what immediately came before it and not ultimately the beginning of the series. So I think that's the essence of your point there, where the beginning, you're calling the beginning of the series the sequel.
No, I'm going to stop you there because I think you're trying to kind of twist things a little bit there. I didn't say that it wasn't ultimately dependent on the thing at the start of the series. What I said was that the start of the series does not have power over all those things in that line. They are contingent upon it ultimately, but that does not give it power over every step in the series. We can see this in the universe we live in. We know this is the case for the one example we have of something that may be a necessary thing, a necessary being, which has caused contingent things. The one example that could, and I'm not saying it is the case because we don't know, but the one example that we have that is the best example that we have of possibly being the case. We know that this is the case. So I'm not saying that it doesn't ultimately rely on it, which is what you said I was saying. That's a straw man. What I'm saying is it does not have power over every single thing in the line. It is not all powerful.
Okay, let me respond to that formulation then. So in this universe, where every single event is contingent on the laws of physics, and the laws of physics have existed since the expansion of the singularity. So that would be an example, that would be a counterexample to what you're saying. Like the fact that
No, it wouldn't.
Is still
no, it wouldn't because
over every subsequent event.
Because the laws of physics, as we know them, weren't present at that initial time. Everything that came from that, all we have with the singularity is a point that was infinitely hot and infinitely dense. As far as we know, the laws of physics might not have even existed at that time. We don't know. All that we know is that for some unknown reason, this thing began to expand. And then everything began to cool down and everything began to settle into what we now call the laws of physics, into where the laws of logic that we have apply. We do not know that those things applied in that singularity. We simply do not know that.
So what I mean is that the laws of physics have existed since the point of expansion. The expansion itself depends on the laws of physics, right? So
all right, so I'm going to jump in here for a second. Forgive me, Richard. So we're at 21 minutes right now in this call, and we did invite you to call back, but I'm not sure that we're getting anywhere. So I am going to step out, and I am going to let Richard dictate the rest of this call. But I think what we're going to do is probably get wrapped up here. So I'd like you to kind of just summarize and conclude with the questions that Richard's asking you. Try in your best, your best way. Try and answer those questions. So go ahead. I'm going to kick it over to Richard.
Yeah, Adam, please summarize and conclude, and then I'll kind of say something to finish.
All right. So, as far as I understand, the two of the objections that you asked me, I'll try and summarize my answer to them. Is that the universe could be the eternal necessary entity, and that we know that the initial event doesn't necessarily have power over any given event that's currently taking place in the universe. What I would say is that viewing things as a bunch of contingency relationships between the singularity and the universe and the laws of physics, this is essentially my view. So I would say that the singularity, as far as we define it, would end up being defined in the same way as God. So the singularity is, spaceless, it's eternal, and and so on. But I would just say that the singularity, if we see it that way, is omnipotent over everything that takes place in the universe, because every event that takes place in the universe is contingent on the laws of physics, and the laws of physics are themselves contingent, and we know that they're contained by the singularity. And I would just say the singularity is just another word for God. And I would say that obviously you were asking me at the beginning, what would you say to the objection that the universe might be necessary? Well, I'd say the universe is not eternal, but the singularity is. And so what the necessary entity that the Aquinas' argument refers to is ultimately the singularity.
Okay, right. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. I would ask that you kind of go away, have maybe formulate those two objections you've just brought into an argument and give us a call back. I'm going to let you go. I appreciate the call. The problem, as I said from the beginning, I've got here is that in Aquinas' argument, there's nothing that states it's nothing like the Big Bang Theory. It's nothing like the singularity. So what Adam's done is he's jumped from his, this idea of Aquinas' argument, which is just allows for eternity, to this singularity thing. That's a problem for me, because he's jumping from one thing to another. Another problem for me with what he's just said is that he's equating the singularity with God.
Yes. And I'm glad you said that. You know why? Because in the beginning of the call, Adam said, well, the point of this argument is not to conclude God. And then the very, very last thing he said was, I'm calling that singularity God. Well, I mean, you have just concluded essentially that God is the singularity that you really didn't mention in your whole argument. And then that's what you throw in to clean it all up. I mean, you haven't provided any proof for God, and you got to do that before you start giving God characteristics. I always say that, and that's kind of a line I draw. So interesting discussion. I would love to hear back from Adam. I'm so thrilled that he called back. You know what I mean? And Adam has called other shows too. So I'm glad to have him as a viewer. And I want him to stay in tune with, what we're doing and make sure that he can give us a call in the future and continue these conversation. And we all want you to know what's going on with the ACA and in our community. We have got an updated website. So head to www.atheist-community.org, and you can learn all about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved. And we do want to hear from you. I frequently talk with people over email or in the chats. If you feel like you want to contact us, you can reach out to tv@atheist-community.org and let us know if you have a question, if there's something we could do better. The opportunity to chat with us is always there. And we actually have a new limited edition t-shirt. So we're going to throw that up. Check out our new limited edition t-shirt, Thoughts and Prayers, what you offer when you don't care enough to actually do something to help. Visit tiny.cc/merch ACA to get them now. Limited editions go away at the end of the month. So, we are going to jump back into our calls. We've got some folks waiting for us. I would like to go first to Florida, where we will speak with Cadance, he, him. Cadance is asking, should we respect theists' beliefs? Or in their words, should we turn the other cheek? So, Cadance, you are on with Jimmy and Richard. How can we help you?
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Hello. Good, thank you. Just want to say a big fan of the show. So I'm a new quote atheist. Really, I'm just a non-believer now. And about 2 years ago, that's when I decided to be a non-believer. I decided my beliefs, I didn't really believe in them. And so, at first I was always like, well, I could still respect my family's viewpoints on religion and God and whatnot. But recently, I had put a post on Facebook about there were things about the Super Bowl, saying that Ice Spice had rigged it with her satanic powers. And I had just put on Facebook that I think, that's ridiculous. And if anybody is posting or promoting Satanism, it's the Christians themselves. And so then I was getting these comments. Like, I'm going to give two examples. One of them is from the comments. A family friend of mine, I'm a musician, and he said that, how dare I say there's no God, and that he survived two terms of cancer, and so there must be a God. And he said he wouldn't support my music anymore. And then also the second example tying into my question is my uncle and I had a conversation about me not believing anymore. And so I had asked him, it was about a 3-hour talk, and I had asked him towards the end, well, if you're against abortion, then why is it okay for God to kill Egyptian babies? And he said with a smile on his face, oh, because it's God's will. And I think from that point, I started really questioning, should I really respect those kind of beliefs? Anyway, I just wanted to get y'all's take on that.
Well, I think it's a good question. There is a dichotomy there, right? I don't think that you have to respect the belief. I don't respect the way Muslims treat or Islam in general treats women, or most religions treat women. I don't respect the stories that come out of the Bible or
Right.
the things that we're supposed to do. But I want to make sure that lack of respect that I have for these ancient, probably completely fictional dogmas, right? Don't spill over into my respect for the human being itself, right? Or themselves. So you take into account after you've been kind of examining your own beliefs and kind of figured out, well, how did I get where I am today, right? I don't know if Cadance, if you were always an atheist, or did you say that you were a new atheist?
I was a Christian growing up.
Yeah, right. So you know, there are ways that we arrive at those ends, right? I mean, there was a reason that I believed the things that I believed when I was a Christian, and I know how I got there. So unraveling that and figuring out what that path was and what those conditions were that made me the way I was is important, I think, to apply to other people as well. You know, they might not have done the unraveling, or maybe don't even care. We have different motivations for believing what we believe. So I think it's important to, you know, separate respect for beliefs, myths, and respect for human rights, you know, and the overall human well-being. You know, I could disagree with somebody all day long, and I know that their claims and their beliefs are just, you know, atrocious, right? If they did any of the things that they believed in, they'd probably be in prison, right? But I wouldn't turn around and then want to kind of inflict some harm or treat them any lesser. So, in fact, that doesn't get us anywhere as a society. That's my answer. I'd like to kick it over to Richard and see what he has.
Yeah, the first thing that sprang to my head when you were talking, Cadance, and I think this is probably just because I've been thrust balls deep in the philosophy of religion for the past few days. I think this is why it sprang up there. Is when you were talking about your relative who said, you know, it survived cancer and that was proof of God. Well, there's such a thing as falsification. And, you know, when we apply to falsification to hypotheses to see if they work. So when somebody says surviving cancer is proof of God, we can falsify that claim really, really, really easily by seeing if anybody has died from cancer. And people have died, so that falsifies that claim. So we, empirically speaking, we have disproved that God is the cause of surviving cancer. But regarding your wider question, I think, I sometimes get pushback from atheists and things because a lot of the work I do is with theists, so it's with non-theistic religious people in the sphere of kind of religion, philosophy, and ethics. And I don't think we should necessarily automatically disrespect theists' beliefs. I think we can respect them,
right.
And I think we should do on a case by case basis. I think if somebody's been, abusing you or like belittling you, taking away your personal autonomy, anything like that because of their religious beliefs, then those beliefs shouldn't be respected. If somebody is flying in the face of what we know to be true, like flat earthers, and people like that, we shouldn't respect their beliefs because there is so much flying in the face of what they believe. And okay, you might say, well, isn't that the same for just somebody who believes in God without any evidence? Well, you could say that. But the people who believe in God without any evidence aren't usually, a lot of the time anyway, on being in your face and arrogant about it and shouting you down and saying what you believe is wrong. A lot of them, and again, I'm talking from kind of my professional basis here, are respectful and things like that. So it goes on a case-by-case basis. I think it's a difficult one. It's one of those things where you as an individual have to work out where you are in relation to those people and how you want to move forward with those relationships with those people. It might be that these are people who are really close to you, who you want to keep close to you. And in that case, I think if you completely disrespect the beliefs, you're in danger of pushing them away. So some sacrifice may have to be made there, even if it's not favourable. But me and Jimmy have been talking for a while, so I'll let you respond to both of us.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great responses. I guess also too, just a quick question because I know you guys got callers. So basically, is it okay though? Because they seem like, at least like my uncle, for example, he's one of those Christians that seem to really like. Him and my cousins went to Planned Parenthood, telling them they're wrong, they shouldn't do this. Do you think we have the right, or just is it even worth it? Like, because you guys have the show basically trying to, and I feel like I try to have my family members, try to think with critical thinking. Is it because they seem to get upset when I express my views on it? And it's not like I go to their door and tell them you're wrong. But when the subject comes up, they seem to get upset. Like I asked my mom the other day, we were kind of talking about this, and I just brought the fact up, and I brought this up to my uncle as well. Is that if I were to die tomorrow, what would you say? Would you say I went to heaven, or would you say I go to hell? And they both said, "Oh, well, that's not for me to decide."
Cadance.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what you just said, and I want to talk about what Richard just said, a point that he made, because it strikes me, I was not going to talk about this today, but I'm going to talk about it because the timing is right, and I want to pay my respects to my cousin that I lost this week to cancer. She was 49, wonderful, beautiful person, smiled, fought to the very end, and we're going to miss her. She was a non-believer. And I don't know how many members of my family knew that. I know that some people did. I knew that. I didn't really have a close relationship with her for most of my life. She was older than me, almost 10 years older than me. But towards kind of the last few years, when I recognized that, we had these lack of beliefs in common, we got a lot closer. And she was actually one of the first people, probably the second person I told about my involvement with the ACA. And she watched the show and she said, "Oh my goodness, Jimmy Jr." Because that's not my real name, but my dad is Jimmy, and I'm just like him. I look just like him, same mannerisms, anything. She thought it was hilarious. So that's my little tribute to my cousin there. But she was a non-believer. And after she passed, all the posts started pouring out. Heaven gained a new angel. My beautiful so-and-so, say what you will, niece, cousin, sister, or whatever it was, is now watching over us. This is not respectful to somebody that we just lost. I mean, this is not taking our loved ones' consideration or our loved ones' thoughts, our loved ones' strongly held beliefs or lack thereof into consideration. I mean, this is incredibly disrespectful, I think. And you know what? I'm sorry to my family that is watching and seeing me say this, but you know what? This is my platform, and you knew what you were getting when you were clicking the link. I didn't want to fire off on a tirade, but you know what? Why should we have to tiptoe around and respect everybody's fragile, unprovable fictional mythologies that they swear they dedicate their lives to, but they never even open their book and understand what it is that they believe. Yet when we tell you we don't believe that, we're the bad guys. Society has a problem,
Right.
where we have made it acceptable, right, to believe in these ridiculous notions that have no proof, but unacceptable to question them. And that took centuries of burning people at the stake and invading their lands and stealing them and killing them. And that's how that comes about. Nobody is religious because it was a good idea most of the time. They're religious because that was what was kind of thrust upon them. And I opened the segment talking about ancient world religions. Would we be worshiping Baal and Melkart had the Carthaginians won the Punic Wars? I mean, we'll never know, but they lost. They lost, and the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. Had the Romans lost, who knows where we would be, and who knows how many people would have died because of it to get us that way, to get us to that point. In any case, Cadence, thank you for letting me take your time to give my tirade. But you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. We need to be able to, with clear conscience and with an ability to rest on our own laurels, say, well, this is what I believe or don't believe, just in the same way that those folks do. I have an uncle who's a member of the clergy. The first time he met my son after my son was born, he put his hand on my son's head and mumbled some kind of prayer. And I'm like, what? That I'm an atheist. Why would you do that? And what did you just accomplish? It's incredibly disrespectful. And you know what? I've come to a point. Go ahead, Cadence. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I think it's because it makes them feel comfortable. It makes them feel like important, I suppose. But
well, I think it's a valid conversation to have, because I think the conclusion is going to be, we need to normalize atheism. We need to normalize skepticism, not even atheism. I'm not asking anybody not to believe. I'm just asking you, well, what is it you believe and why? And please tell me, and I'm happy to discuss it with you. And I'm not going to judge you for it. And it's one of those things, Cadence, where, we need to respect their beliefs? Well, you know what? I have no problem doing that. If you want to bow your heads and pray before a meal, by all means do that. If you want to crucify people, well, I'm sorry. That's a line that I'm not going to respect. And so there's a give and take. I'm sorry. I have not reflected on what Richard wants to add to that. So Richard, any comments on that?
I don't even need to fucking add anything to that. I just answered it for me. Look, I was going to say that along the line, same things of Jimmy. You have a right, and we should normalize, being atheists. And your pushback from your parents might be them trying to process it. And, I think with your mum's response as well, she's clearly still absolutely loves you as a person. I think that's obvious from the response that she gave you. And I think she is trying to probably just kind of register and process what this thing means that you're trying to tell her. So, but yeah, you have every right to do so, and we should be normalizing it, just as Jimmy said. And if the line is crossed when you get people like Jimmy's uncle. I don't want to talk bad about Jimmy's family, but the line is crossed.
Yeah, go ahead.
The line is crossed when somebody comes up and they know you're an atheist and they do that kind of thing. And it goes both ways. If I walked into a church and someone was having a baptism for their child, and my niece or nephew was getting baptized, or their child was getting baptized, and I walked in and started saying, "No, you don't need any of that holy water because God doesn't exist," that would be equally as disrespectful. There are lines of respect that we can have. for people just for them being human beings. There are places we can have these conversations. We have a call-in show, where there are places that we can have these conversations, but in real life, there are places we can have these conversations, and there are appropriate places to have these conversations. And, let your mum know that you don't believe. And you don't necessarily have to jump in straight away saying, so right now we must talk about whether, Anselm's contingency argument is sufficient or not. You don't have to do that. You can just, let her process the information. You don't have to bring it up every time you go and see her. If it comes up, respond to it in a calm manner and just have the conversation and say, well, this is how I feel. I still love you. I still love you as my parents. I've not changed as a person. It's just the things I believe in that are slightly different to what you believe in. And if you want to talk about it, we can have that conversation. Go on, please.
Yeah, and it's easy to talk to my mom about it because her and my stepdad they want me to believe, but they respect that I don't. So it's easy for me to be like, I actually talked to my mom the other night saying, when I criticize Christians, I'm not criticizing people like you. I love you and my stepdad. And so I think we actually live with them. So it's all right with us. And also, I just want to say one more thing that seems like religious people, they're all about freedom of speech until someone says something they don't agree with. And, that can go with anything. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Go on, Jimmy.
If you make the commitment to being open-minded and committed to equal rights and adhering to your respective constitution, then you need to be consistent, right? You can't just kind of shut it down when it doesn't work for you. So,
right.
Cadence, I think you're doing the right thing. I mean, I think you're very courageous. It's not easy to have these conversations because, you don't want to let your family, you don't want to hurt people's feelings. And a lot of times it is characterized that way. I don't want to be this reason people's feelings are hurt. I don't want to make people feel like I think they're stupid or whatever, but I don't feel those things. I think my uncle is a great man, and I think a lot of my family members are great people, and I know them for their human side.
Same here.
I can judge them based on their human side. I don't need their religion to judge them, so I just think you're doing the right thing. What I would say, you don't need to make everything your fight. You can pick your battles. You don't have to be,
That's true.
Have the atheist A on your chest and barge into everything. I mean, there are some conversations I just don't have. There are some times where I approach things just a little bit more delicately than other times. And so I think your level of tact will need to develop and kind of respond to things on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, I think it was a great discussion.
Yeah, go ahead. You got other callers. I appreciate you guys. No,
I want you.
Much.
It's okay.
You.
I'll tell you what. I'm in charge here, and I will kick you off when I'm ready. I want you to conclude here. What are your thoughts on everything we've said?
I think it's great. I mean, Richard made a great point. Like you just said, pick your battles. Don't go to a Bible study or a church and be like, you're wrong, because you'd be a hypocrite. You're doing just the same thing as an extreme Christian would do. And I think you made a good point to pick your battles and respect like my family and. For who they are as human beings, not because of what they believe, even though I don't respect what they believe, but I see them as people. I see them as loving people. So that's why it's just a little irritating to me. It's like, if you're loving people and you don't think that, being gay is wrong, or you don't think that, whatever, then, what's the use of the Bible? But I understand that's what they were growing up with. And, you guys have given me very good insight on all of it. So thank you.
Excellent. Yeah. Richard?
Yeah, Cadence, I think you are an amazing person. I really, really do. I think the fact that you still live with your parents as well, and you're having these conversations and you're having them respectfully, and you're saying we've given you great advice, but it sounds to me like you're already doing what we've kind of advised you to do. You're already in that place, and you sound like you've got a fantastic family. You sound like you've got a really loving family, and you carry on doing what you're doing. Just carry on letting them know that you being an atheist hasn't changed you as a person. You're still their son. You still love them.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing. You're doing everything right, and I think you're amazing.
Yeah,
thank you. I just wanted to be sure I was doing it right.
Oh, well, I think you should keep doing what you're doing. I really appreciate your call. Thanks a lot, and keep tuning in. And, we are going to get back to our rest of our script. I mean, we got an agenda to follow, don't we, Richard? We are right on target. We are doing this like a couple of professionals today. I'll tell you what I'm going to do right now is punt the top 5 patrons over to Richard Gilliver. Richard, would you like to read the top 5 patrons?
I will when the senior production crew give them to me.
Oh, man.
Can't see them.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I will tell you, man, we were almost professionals, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to do something else then. I am going to read some super chats because we have got super chats coming in. And for you callers out there that are waiting for us, please hang on. We are going to get right to you. First, I want to recognize Dominique Cullen, who gives us $2, says, please don't forget and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks for helping us out there and spreading the word. Yeah, like our channel, subscribe, and stay in touch with what we're doing. And then we have Gamers Go Along, gifted 1 Talk Heathen membership. That's awesome. So, Richard, anything to say on that? I think the crew was kind of expecting you to read that one out. I stole that from you, but what do you think of that?
I think it's awesome. I do. Miranda Rensberger, who's a member for 1 month, sent $5 and said, I just became more of an atheist, if that were possible. And Greg, Gamers Go Along, gifted 1 more Talk Heathen membership. What an awesome person.
Great. Yeah, you know what? We're going to run through these. Let's get through these. Infidel64 gave 666. I thought Adam was going to convert you both for a second. He almost had me. I don't think Richard was going, man. That was part 2 of that conversation. Maybe he'll get Richard in part 3. We will see. And then Big Jen Davies. Yes, I love Big Jen. I've talked to Big Jen before.
I love Big Jen too.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We're friends on TikTok. I mean, she is all about it. So she donated 10 pounds. Richard, that's a pound, right?
That's a pound.
Gentlemen, it's so good to have you both on the program today. Simply the best. You know what I love about people from Britain? They spell program so professionally with 2 M's and an E. And, I just love that. And then we've got our top 5. Richard, back over to you.
The top 5, which we do now have, are Dinglebury Jackson. Oops, all singularity. Devor Valjean, Keleve Helevete, and left in the leaves, and the honourable mention goes to Icon or Classed.
All right.
Thank you very much for your patronage. And on the point of patrons, soon, very soon, there will be a little bit extra on the Patreon for you. A little video I recorded earlier today and have posted on there. It's not live yet, but it will be soon, for keep your eye on that. And I'm working on some little extra things just to give you those little extra thank yous. So keep your eyes up for those in the coming months. We really, really do appreciate your patronage.
Yes. Yeah, that is great. And, I love all the things that we're doing here at the ACA. Like every time I'm going on to Discord or I'm going on to TikTok, I see my tribe members just out there doing their thing and just carrying out the ACA mission, trying to promote that skepticism that we would like to see people exercise. And there's so many different avenues you can go down. And so I really, consider myself lucky to be a part of this group. And I got a great group of folks who are just making it happen. So we are going to go to another caller, and this guy's been waiting. So without further ado, we are going to talk to Connor, him from Texas. Science plausibility of giants during biblical times. All right. Well, Richard, you brought up giants, and so you're going to have to talk about giants now with Connor. Connor, how you doing? You are on with Jimmy and Richard.
Hey, guys. First off, Jimmy, I'd like to say I feel for you about your cousin. My family's going through a similar thing. We just discovered our grandmother has stage 4 this last week.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And yeah, man, I appreciate that. And, I wish you all the best. I hope things get better and everybody feels better soon. Thank you.
Yeah.
So going through this, I'm going to go off of what is known according to historians and archaeologists about ancient human societies. And that at the time, this stuff would have been before it was ever written down on anything. It was when humanity was making the transition from nomadic hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural societies. And that is where the key to this is, because as we know, during the ancient agricultural societies, people were, even by today's standards, still shorter than modern people. But the interesting thing about that is ancient hunter-gatherers, Paleolithic times and all that, because of the amount of physical activity that was required to gather enough food, and would have caused an increase, a larger skeletal and muscular system, to where they would have been they would have been easily getting up to 7 feet tall, whereas the average for the early agricultural societies would have been closer to 5 foot. And so, because of biblical times was more like coming out of hunter-gatherer and going into that other period, then that would be why people
I need to recap. I need a recap, Connor. Hold on. So forgive me if I misheard you. Are you saying that hunter-gatherers were taller than people after the agricultural revolution, roughly 8,000 to 10,000 years ago? You're saying hunter-gatherers were larger because they were more active, and okay, so you're making it
far more physical activity.
So they were like essentially living a workout style type of life, right? Like they were just so physically active that they were, I don't know, jacked. They were jacked up. They were pretty big, right? Is that what you're saying?
Even before the invention of cooking, our jaws were much bigger than what they are today. Like just the amount of physical activity required for everything.
Yeah, well, all right. So I can speak to that a little bit. And I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I don't know of any evidence that supports what you're saying. In fact, I would say that all of the evidence points to the contrary, that people were smaller. The reason why they were smaller is because they had less calories coming in every day. They were burning more calories, yes, but they had less coming in than when they did during the agricultural revolution. They had to go find their food, and it wasn't always guaranteed. When the agricultural revolution happened and people were able to domesticate plants and animals, they had more calories at their disposal. They could eat more. They could eat whenever they wanted. I mean, that wasn't the case in hunter-gatherer societies, So as a result, humans actually grew larger, and that continues to happen. Evolution has not stopped.
Well,
I don't know of any evidence.
To counter that real quick.
Just 1 second. I don't know of any evidence that says that human beings used to be bigger and that their active lifestyle made them bigger.
Well, there are a few hunter-gatherer tribes in Africa where that is actually the average for them, just to be 7 feet tall.
Okay, but are those giants? And is that one tribe? I mean, when we're talking about hunter-gatherers and we're talking about early humans, we're also talking about a very, very nuanced situation. You had, or nuanced set of circumstances. You had areas that the climate was different, food was more scarce, and you had people isolated to islands. They grew differently. You have, if you're going to talk about people in Africa where the weather's always warmer, they have more access possibly to food. And if you're going to, and it might be expected that, they would be different as compared to somebody from a completely different lifestyle, it's a completely different set of circumstances. And there is no way to accurately look at hunter-gatherer societies today and make a conclusion on hunter-gatherer societies of 10,000 plus years ago. And the reason is there's no tribe in the world today, even if there are claims that they are untouched by humanity. They have all been touched by humanity. Everybody on this planet has all in some way been touched by globalization, changing conditions, weather, climate change. Those are all the products of industrialization, and a lot of tribes that have no contact with the outside world still face those consequences. It's happening in Africa. The Lake Chad is drying up. People who rely on that water source, people whose livestock rely on that water source, are turning to terrorist groups because their livelihood is gone. Fishing societies, fish are moving away because they are going into warmer waters, but they're also being overfished. Even if the tribes or the societies that go after those fish for food are not having contact with the outside world, they're still impacted by it. So I kind of went on a slew of things there. I would like to punt it to Richard real quick, and then I would like to see what you have to say about that.
Hello, I have a friend called Google. And Google is very good to me. And Google has returned to me the 7 tallest tribes in Africa. The 7 tallest tribes in Africa are the Somali tribe, of an average feet of 5'9". The Anuak tribe with a average of 5'10". The Tutsis, average of 5'11". The Wolof tribe, who have an average of 6 feet tall. The Newer tribe, which have an average of 6 feet tall. The Maasai, which have an average of 6'2", and the Dinka, which have an average of 6'3". They are the tallest tribe in Africa. Now, what you might be pointing to is examples of exceptionally tall people within those tribes. And indeed, the Dinka tribe do have one example. I might pronounce this wrong, so excuse me. Manute Bol, a former National Basketball Association player, was 7'7" tall, but the average for that tribe is 6'3". So there is no notion whatsoever that modern tribes in Africa have an average of 7 feet tall and above. I also know of no tribe, no group of people in the past with an average height of 7 feet or above. I'm not sure where you got that information from. I'd like to see the kind of studies and background checks for that. We have an email which you can send that to. But respond to myself and Jimmy, because you made the claim that the tribes in Africa with an average size of 7 feet. A quick Google search disproves that. And that is from We Afrique, which is an African website which talks about African people.
You know something? I'm gonna kick this over to Connor in a minute. I want to give you a chance to respond, but we have a backup host here who's got some expertise in geology. He knows a thing or two, okay? And he's got some comments, and I want to see what he has to say, and maybe he can reflect on your claim as well. So, crew, if you could, drop me out, bring in the great Kelly Laughlin, and let's get him to respond. But first, Connor, you can go ahead and start responding and wait for Kelly to come up.
So the only thing I could say to what Richard just said is, maybe I do need to relook into what I saw and double check on that. Maybe I saw something different, and maybe I just need to double check sources again. You were making good points. I just thought, it was a very interesting topic to go over. But earlier, the only thing I could say as a counter to what you said, Jimmy, about people starting out in the agricultural revolution having access to all the food they needed, they actually did, and famine was still very common up until the modern day. So people were still struggling just to find food. The only difference is that they weren't having to regularly search for food across 10 square miles and walk 40 miles a day to find what they needed.
Connor, I first of all, I really appreciate you saying that you might need to revisit that. That is refreshing. As I said at the top of the show, I've been talking to people about this subject for the past week or so, and not many of them have been as humble as you, let me tell you. So I really do appreciate that. What I would say is, there are plenty of resources here, and doing a quick Google search as I just did isn't necessarily the best way to find a resource. Neither is watching YouTube videos. There are plenty of scientific journals you can get to. There's a thing called Google Scholar, which, although it's not the best from an academic point of view, it's a good starting point if you don't have kind of access through your institution or whatever to academic articles and stuff. And you can find lots and lots of papers through that on archaeology, especially relating to the bones of people who've been found in the past and things. And one of like I said, I've been talking about this the last week, and nobody has come up with an actual article which states that these and I know you're talking about 7 feet on average, but there's been claims made of 8 to 11 feet, and there have been no skeletons of that size found and published in archaeological papers. And these are an archaeological journal is where this stuff would be published. That is the first point of call. If you ever see a headline that says giant skeleton found 11 feet tall, the first part of call is to go into the article and see which journal it's been published in, because very oftentimes it's not been published in any journal. It's just somebody's opinion or somebody who's written a book with no academic credentials behind it whatsoever. It's just the claim they're making. You can always find, whether it's Wikipedia, whether it's just a newspaper headline, if it's been published in a reputable journal, you should always be able to find a link to that journal article and actually go and have a look what the article says. Because and we've got a problem here, and this is a problem across the board. Even in popular science magazines, good quality popular science magazines, you will often see an article headline which it doesn't exactly relate to what's in the paper that's been published on the subject. There a lot of these places, even if the good resources, are out to make money and like to go for the grab a headline kind of thing. So always try and get to the original journal article if you can. And Google Scholar is a good starting point, as I say, for that. Unfortunately, a lot of these journals are locked behind paywalls, so you can't always access them, but, go to the source. Always try and go to the source. But no, I appreciate that. And I'm going to let Kelly jump in because I've been talking for far too long and give you his take.
You guys might hate me, but
right?
Yeah, I am a geologist, and Jimmy and Richard might hate me for this, but I am going to agree with you that 10,000 years ago, people were slightly taller, and they did have a slightly larger skeleton. So that is a actual thing. Now, why that was, there are several different factors. We're not absolutely sure. One of the probably leading hypothesis is that people did have a much more athletic lifestyle back in that time. However, recently, just in the past few hundred years, the trend of getting smaller has been reversed, and humans are getting taller again. So we don't now, obviously, we're not all out hunting and gathering our food, and that's not what's making us taller. So it's some other environmental thing that is doing it. And I'm not sure why the difference in height matters. I mean, things will change over time. We will adapt to the environment as it is. And if we don't need to be taller, one of the hypotheses about why we may have gotten taller is that it would help us to see farther across the open plains when we were searching for prey or for predators. So we don't need to have that anymore. And we live in cities with houses around us, so we don't need to see as far anymore. So that height is not as important as it was. But now why that trend is reversing right now, I honestly couldn't tell you. And I don't think scientists know either. We just have been able to measure that there has been reversing trend over the last 100 years or so with people getting taller and taller on the average.
Kelly, the number one thing I heard about that, the correlation, is that societies with varied diets across plant and meats has allowed for them to get taller.
But yeah, I get that. But we eat a varied diet of mixed vegetable and plant and meat materials today, and we actually have a better varied diet today. A lot of people in that time period, you might be eating the same thing for 3 weeks because that was what was ripe. Pardon?
I was saying that's what about today, why we're getting taller.
Oh, I see. Okay, my bad. And well, that's possible. I haven't heard that. I suppose it's possible. Before 10,000 years ago, though, we were probably not eating that much of a varied diet. We were, especially in a hunter-gatherer society, the types of food that were in your area was what you had to eat. And you could only eat those things when they were available to be eaten. Like fruits would only be available for 3-4 weeks of the year, and you would be eating a lot of that fruit while it was ripe. So back then, you were getting a much less varied diet than we are getting today. So I don't think that would be the cause of that higher or of that taller people. I had a hard time saying that back then than they are today. So yeah, I mean, maybe we are eating healthier over the last 100 years. That is probably making us healthier as a whole, and that may, and in fact, influence the size of our body. So I could see that happening. I'm just not sure what all this matters. That's my yeah, it's happening. People do change over time. They'll change height, weight, body mass. That's another thing that has changed. We really think that people have lost a lot of body mass since then, too. Now, I mean, say a lot. We've gotten slightly shorter. We've gotten slightly smaller. Since the people 10,000 years ago. So it's not really that big of a change on the average.
So your question about why this matters, you're right. At the core of it, for society, it doesn't really matter. I actually just find these to be fun conversations to be had. Like, is there what is the kernel of truth to anything in all these ancient stories?
What truth were we looking for? What truth were we looking for in people's height? I'm sorry.
Well, if it was a plausible thing, like, was it possible? That's the kind of conversations I enjoy.
Yeah, sure. Connor, go ahead, Richard. I was going to say we can test these because we can measure skeletons, but go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I think there's something you've just said which is really, really interesting there. And there's a definitive difference between there being a kernel of truth in something, which I have no problem with, and somebody claiming that there were giants who were 8 to 11 foot tall who populated the region in the Bible and lived, and this proves the Bible to be true. Now, these are very, very different things, because a kernel of truth, as we've already said when we were talking about those 7 tallest tribes in Africa, you might find, in a tribe which has got an average height of 6'3", a member who's 7'11". And when you're writing stories down, this person could achieve kind of legendary status, and that's plausible. And there's nothing supernatural about it. There's nothing outside of the mundane about it. But when it gets translated into a story, which then turns into there were a race of giants that lived, that's where that kernel of truth, we have to say, well, what does this actually mean to us? Because we can accept a kernel of truth. That's fair enough. No problem with that whatsoever. But does that evidence a race of giants who were 8 to 11 feet tall? I would say no. But I appreciate the conversation you're bringing to us, because you do seem like a good, you're good-natured, and you're having this conversation in good faith, and I appreciate that very much.
It's always fun and nice to call into the show.
Yeah, well, I'm back now, and I just want to say thank you very much to Kelly for coming in and giving his perspective, giving some expertise. Boy, am I glad that I called him in. And Connor, I just want to say, fair point. I mean, the agricultural revolution didn't solve everybody's problems. There was certainly still famine, and it didn't take place all at the same time and all over the world. So, nothing is ever monolithic, is it? And that actually is kind of a good characterization of maybe the way that I was kind of characterizing human ancestry or human history versus the way that Kelly was. Pretty much everything Kelly said is counter to what I understood or the timeline that we have lived by as a species. So I'm glad that we're able to kind of have this conversation and give different points of view. Gives me an opportunity to get better. Gives us all an opportunity to learn something new, and so that's what it's all about. Let's relate it back to the ACA mission. This is definitely a conversation that I wish more people were having, instead of these conversations where they are positing a deity or some kind of supernatural power, and there's really nothing to back it up at all. I would much rather have people accept the fact that humans have been around for an extremely long time and that there are still a lot of gaps to fill in. And these conversations, the studying, the research, it is all going to make it more understandable and more digestible. So I think that's going to be my closing comments. Connor, thank you so much for calling us. Did you have anything else?
Nope, that's it. I'll let you go. I got to get to stuff I need to do. I also got to get on the road.
All right, man. Keep tuning in, and thank you very much for the call. So we have another caller on the line, and we are going to talk to Andrew, him in Florida. Andrew thinks Daoism offers the greatest outlook and interpretation of the universe. So we're going to talk about that. Andrew, you are on with Jimmy and Richard. What do you say, Andrew?
Greetings, gentlemen. Daoism is a fully naturalist, non-dogmatic religion that I think atheists should embrace wholeheartedly, because it supports scientific outlooks on the universe and the way of life. And so instead of calling it God, I would just say what we're calling God is incorrect. It's actually the Tao, the life force of the universe. It's the underlying principle or energy that permeates all existence. And so Andrew, if we see it this way, then
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. If we just see it this way, we can see the natural flow of the universe being not controlled by an agency, but by simply a non-agent force.
Okay. So, Andrew, are you a theist?
No.
You're not a theist. Okay. All right, Andrew, I gotta call you out here. You have called in before and said that you were a Catholic. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
so why would Catholicism?
So why would you tell me that you're not a theist? Why would you tell me you're not a believer?
Oh, because I believe what I'm calling, because I've become much more progressive in my journey.
Okay, well,
and what Christians call God.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry?
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. Look, getting some clarification, because I find it difficult to have a conversation with a Catholic who's trying to get me to accept Daoism. And, not having a clear-cut position could make it really difficult, to just have an honest conversation. But you seem to be saying that you are not as much of a Catholic as you used to be, and now you're accepting this Taoist life force perspective that the thing that the Tao represents, it must be God. But is this Tao like, all right, so where do you stand? Like, look, I have no proof, first of all, as an atheist, that there is a life force that connects all things. And I know that's what Daoism likes to purport. So I have no reason to believe that I am somehow connected, to a tree, to a forest, to a continent, or that Richard and I are connected at all. As much as I'd like to call him my friend, I don't think that, our lives are intertwined in any way. And I'm just not sure how to get there. I would need something a little bit substantial, some substantial evidence to try and get me there. But then how do you get there from Catholicism and still practice Catholicism? I mean, are you saying that Yahweh is not real anymore, but you're still like going to do communion? Because you still said you practice your Catholicism, yet you're progressive and you're a Taoist. Man, we're all over the place. I think your position's a little all over the place. So I kind of need you to, can you negotiate, or can you navigate around being Catholic and Taoist, and give me some clarification there? And then, why should I accept Taoism? I mean, why is somebody who doesn't believe, who relies on evidence to form my beliefs, accept Taoism? So you've got two tasks ahead of you. So consider that for a moment. I want to get Richard's take. Richard?
It's going to have a lot more than two fucking tasks.
Oh, man.
How many Taoist texts have you read, Andrew?
Oh, the Tao Te Ching. So
you've read the Tao Te Ching?
Just one.
So you've read you when you say you're a Taoist, you're not taking into account the Li Zai, the Niai, the Wenzai, the Hu Chang Wang, the Tai Ping Jing, the Lexian Zhuan, or any of the other hundreds of Taoist texts. You're just taking in that one. And I also want to kind of ask you.
I'm studying the Tao Te Ching right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. You're just getting into it. I just wanted to kind of get a background of where you were coming from. And you've kind of got this very, I don't know if you've heard of this chap, but what I would call an Alan Watts impression of Taoism, which is very westernized and lovely and all flowy, and everything's lovely and everything's connected.
Alan Watts.
But say that again.
Correct, Alan Watts. Exactly. That's who I'm listening to right now.
Yeah, the problem with Alan Watts is very what shall we say, new agey, and doesn't it might reflect a general spirit of vague Taoism. But what he leaves out is all the wonderful Taoist practices of alchemy. He leaves Taoist practices out of trying to achieve eternal life. And they tried to achieve this through drinking mercury, which is tends to have the opposite effect of giving you eternal life. And all these wonderful actual Taoist principles and Taoist practices, which aren't covered by this kind of vague, flowery notion of Taoism that kind of Watts and other people like him put forward. And I'm not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, because, everybody's allowed to interpret things in their own way. It just seems to me like you're taking this form of Taoism which you can attach to Catholicism, and kind of including those principles and ignoring the parts of Taoism which are really, really problematic to Catholicism, because you wouldn't be going to heaven if you had eternal life with your physical body. And, that's problematic. And I'm just really interested in why you've kind of and I appreciate that you're new to Daoism. Don't get me wrong. So I'll bear that in mind. But I'm wondering why you've started with this form of Daoism, which is which you can tap on to Catholicism, and it's not so much of a problem, and ignored the forms of Daoism which are problematic to Catholicism.
So, in summation, right? Getting back to my question. In the end, you've just spoken to Richard, who has got a great deal of familiarity. He gave you some points to consider, and now, having said all that, how do you reconcile your Catholicism with Daoism? That's the question I think Richard and I both want you to answer. Richard, fair enough?
Yeah.
All right. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I've been studying comparative religion, and so you can practice religion in a way that's non-fundamentalist, non-dogmatic. And I've heard that most religions actually mix very different beliefs. Like even within the Bible, there are mixtures of different beliefs. Like Paul rejects circumcision, so he's retconning the Old Testament. And so when I'm studying the Bible through a historical critical lens, I just see a complexity of different varied beliefs, and people adopting the ones that fits their own interpretation of the world. And there's even different views of the afterlife within the Bible. So, like, some books say nothing happens, like Ecclesiastes. Some books say you go to heaven, not heaven, you get resurrected. Some books says you go to Sheol. So if the Bible is that diverse, then a religion isn't something to be super dogmatic about. And that's why I'm approaching this. I don't want to lose everything I've gained from Christianity, but I want to throw away the toxic elements of it. And I'm still trying to interpret what God is to this day, but I'm okay.
No, that's great, because you and I have talked about whether or not the Catholic Church is progressive, and you have made cases that you've called it and made cases about the church being progressive, but then you, in that call, also admitted, you know what, actually they won't marry homosexual people. And I believe we've talked about abortion with you, and you were a pretty diehard Catholic, from what I can tell. Now, it seems that you have gone out of your way to study comparative religions, and that you are now getting rid of the toxic traits of the religion you were brought up with, and you are looking to adopt more positive traits. I applaud you for that. I couldn't be happier for what I'm hearing. And I just hope you keep going down that road. My issue is, you're right. The Bible, religion in general, does have many nuances to it. How do you figure out which ones work and which ones don't, right? That is the key question that we seem to always ask and never get a clear-cut answer on. How do you decipher, between the things that are clearly atrocious and then the other ones that really aren't so bad? And then so Richard asks you, hey, look, how come you're accepting Daoism, but you're only accepting it for the positive parts, and you're not really taking into consideration all of the kind of crazy things that go along with it? Crazy, I say, with lack of a better term at the moment. But, in hindsight, I have to say, I'm really not all that surprised. I mean, this is a common approach to religion, right? People like to put off the really bad things and accept the really good things, but you have to deal with the whole thing, right? You have to deal with the entire book. You have to be able to reconcile that entire book. And it's impossible to do. And I think that you're going to run into the same problems with Daoism as you run into with Catholicism. So I wish you the best on your journey, and I hope you keep questioning the things that you have a problem with. But in the end, I think you're still going to continue to run into the same issues the deeper you get with whatever religion it is that you choose. And I hope that skepticism, I hope you maintain that skepticism. I hope that you still are not okay with the atrocities, even if you move to a new religion. So I don't know. Do you have a point on that? Do you want to respond? What do you want to give Richard a go?
Sure.
It's your call,
sure.
Andrew.
I guess I'll give a quick response to that, and then I would like to hear what Richard says about mixing, different religious beliefs or practices. I just want to say that we're American, or we're from the UK, and so we can embrace our citizenship without accepting all the toxic elements of our government. Our government has positive elements and toxic elements. And so we rewrite our constitution and we don't accept all of it. Or like, for example, we have relationships with people. Our partners have positive elements and there's toxic elements of my partner that I don't embrace. So I don't know why religion has to be perfect for you to embrace the good elements. It's just an aspect of your life.
Are you really a Catholic though? My point would be, are you really a Catholic though? Or are you really a Taoist if you're not doing all the things that goes with that religion? I mean, you could be anything you want to be. Why even put a label on it? You can be just a person that, wants to do this thing because it's good. Why call yourself a Catholic or why you call yourself a Taoist if you're not going to embrace the entire Taoist perspective? Now, the problem I have with, this is a little bit of a different conversation, I think, but the problem I have with comparing constitution with or any constitution with a holy document or a religious text is that one was clearly, obviously made by people, written on histories that we can verify, and is open to change. One, on the other hand, is none of those things. And I'm not going to tell you which one is which, but I think you already know what I'm referring to, which one is which. And without me even saying it, if you could acknowledge that one is probably more made up than the other one that's definitely not, well, I think the analogy is poor. I think it's not a good analogy at all. But I want to hold our thoughts and put a pin in that for a second and let Richard respond.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Jimmy a little bit on this, and I might disagree with him. We'll see where it goes. I'm with him on the aspect of I see nothing wrong with taking positive elements out of different traditions and different religions if it's going to be genuinely helpful to you, if it's beneficial to you, and it's not harmful to anyone else. If you want to do a little bit of this from Catholicism, a little bit of a ritual from Catholicism, and a little bit, a little bit of meditation from Daoism. I don't recommend drinking mercury to live forever, but if you want to do any of the positive things which are going to benefit you and maybe even benefit those people around you, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong at all with that. There is a caveat to that. And that caveat is that we had a caller last week, well, not name, who won't speak to me, but he spoke to some of the other hosts, and he likes to mix lots of these religious ideas, these kind of vague religious ideas, these vague niceties from religion, with taking immense amounts of drugs, which is not recommended, because what it leads you is to believe that there is a God in the sky. And that's what I'm not suggesting you're going to take loads of drugs, but what the caveat is, make sure that if you're going to take the positive elements of these, that you're not going to kind of go down the route of believing that there is that you're not believing in a God, that you're not taking on the supernatural elements to it, that you are being skeptical and critical thinking while you're taking these positive elements out of it. Equating the Tao with the God is not doing that. And I think that's something you need to check within yourself, because it's all right taking practices which are helpful. But when you start saying, well, I believed in this Catholic God, but now I believe in this Tao thing and I'm equating them as the same thing, you're not really stepping outside of that supernatural thinking. You're still in that box. And I think while you're still in that box, doing this thing of taking elements from different religions is not going to give you the benefits that Jimmy's talking about and which I think are possible. Because you're still stuck in that, you basically seem to be cherry picking to kind of cover up the difficulties you're having with one tradition and taking elements from another tradition to kind of cover those elements up. So you might have problems with the traditional omnipresent God of the Bible. the classical God of theism, and you're trying to like take something else and still hang on to that, but call it by a different name. And I don't think that's tremendously helpful. It comes down to whether you care about what you believe in to be true, or whether you're doing it to be comforted by it. And that is a distinction, I think, that only you can make within yourself. And the difficulty with these problems is I might throw something at you and say, I think you're doing this, and you might automatically push back just to defend yourself. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to kind of go away and have a think about what are the reasons I am adopting this different tradition. What are the reasons I'm still holding on to these elements of Catholicism? Is it because I still believe a God to be true and I'm trying to kind of reconcile the bits that I don't agree with within that? Or is it because there are certain traditions, rituals or traditions within Catholicism which aren't going to harm anyone, but I find helpful in my daily life? And these practices from Daoism enhance those. You know, that's fair enough. But I think you've got to think within yourself, and you've got to have these conversations with yourself as to what are the reasons you're going outside of your kind of the tradition you grew up with. And why are you taking these elements from these other traditions? And what is it that's appealing about these elements from other traditions? Because, the red flag was raised with me when I mentioned Alan Watts, and you were like, yeah, that's the guy. Because Alan Watts is very much one of these people who will throw woo out there. It was very much the forerunner to Deepak Chopra and people like that. And he'll throw lots of things out there, which are all very wonderful. They sound lovely. They sound very idealistic, but it's absolute bullshit. And I think you've got to kind of reconcile within yourself whether you're doing this because you're genuinely kind of questioning things and seeking an answer to things, or whether you're doing this to make yourself feel comfortable while grasping onto these traditions which help you do that. And I'd like you to respond, Andrew, because I've talked for quite a while.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. It makes a lot of sense what you guys said. It makes a lot of sense. I would just say that religion doesn't have to be all about belief. It's also a lot about practices and cultural traditions. If you take away the supernatural elements and you take away the literalism of those beliefs, and you can just say, oh, these are just beliefs. They don't have to be facts. I see a lot of cultural benefit in religion as a psychologial and cultural phenomenon from a humanistic perspective. So you're right, Richard and Jimmy Jr. Because I do see things in Christianity that kind of don't make sense with science and history, and even toxic elements that are bad for me psychologically. I have been practicing Qigong for 2 years as a Catholic, and I don't see. I guess most Catholics would be uncomfortable with it, but I see that it has only enhanced my life. So even though it might not be literally true, these religions do create a lot of meaning. And I can't get to, okay, therefore there's no God of any kind at all. I'm an agnostic when it comes to the supernatural, but I do see a lot of things in Daoism that make sense. So that's kind of where I am, and it's a journey. So I appreciate the feedback, and that's.
That was very insightful, and I really appreciate you, being honest and willing to have these conversations. I want to be open to you a little bit. When I was in college, that was when my religion really started to fall apart for me, because I was a history major and a religious studies minor. I actually considered myself a Taoist first. I didn't skip straight from being a Lutheran to being an atheist. And, Kelly Laughlin, one of our hosts who was just on the last call before me, I believe he's mentioned this before, that he switched to Buddhism. I mean, he made a transition from this non-deity-centric religion to something that is just like a set of values, but they're values that are, maybe God-given, essentially, or like natural, right? And they make up this religion without actually having to have a God. So it's a common thing for a lot of people to do. It's take these baby steps away while they're I dare say transitioning. I mean, I don't know what it is exactly that you're looking for. I don't know where you'll end up, but I definitely think that you have transitioned away from being Catholic. And I just think that, you should keep doing what you're doing. So I appreciate the call. Thank you for being a repeat caller and just being honest and continuing to have these discussions. Richard?
Yeah, and continue to call in and let us know where you're going with it and how your journey progresses. And I agree. We've had some, Andrew and the call earlier on in the night, we've had some about the Giants. We've had some really good faith conversations tonight, and I really appreciate those. That's, for me, is what this show's all about. So I just want to extend my thanks, Andrew, as well, before we let you go for that and your contribution to this and your honesty within this call as well. Both myself and Jimmy, I'm sure, appreciate that you are on a journey and that, you are doing a lot of thinking through things, and you will come across, I'm not going to say you will come across a lot of atheists who will be shouting at you, and I'll definitely see comments from atheists who have been shouting at the screen saying, well, you need to get rid of it straight away, you need to get rid of that supernatural thinking straight away. It's a process, doesn't always happen. I'm not saying it can't, but it doesn't always happen. It sounds like you're going in the right direction, and it sounds like you're considering things. And when you're considering things, you are going in the right direction. Because a lot of the times when we come across people who are like transitioning between one faith or another, or from one faith to atheism, what we get is that they don't consider things, and that's when they become dogmatic and refuse to listen. So as whenever anyone's considering something, as you are, I think it's worthwhile, regardless of where you are on the path. So thank you. We are going to let you go. I'm going to drop you. Thank you for all the callers today. I'm going to hand it over to the wonderful Jimmy Jr., our pilot for today, and let him take us wherever we need to go next.
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say that, this is, I think, the second show where I've spoken incorrectly about hunter-gatherers. So clearly, I need to kind of hone my skills. Once I go outside the agricultural revolution, I don't know that I really know what I'm talking about. Maybe I need to figure some things out. Let's talk about the Romans, though. Let's talk about the Carthaginians, the Egyptians. I got you. Okay, I got you all day long. But great. I love the historical conversations. I loved today's show, Richard. And I always like hosting with you. Do you know when you're going to be on again, or what your schedule looks like coming up?
I have no idea. I do because I've got it written down. I only make the schedules. I'm not supposed to know what they are. But no, look, it's been a great, fun show today, and I think we've had some great calls, and we've had a great variety of calls, and it's always wonderful working with you as well, Jimmy Jr. And I think there's somebody. I want to address two comments before we go. I want to address two comments from the live chat tonight. One of them, which I've just noticed, and I can't read it word for word because I can't see it anymore, but said something along the lines of, and this is my pet peeve with people, and people do this with Buddhism all the time as well. Taoism doesn't contain any supernatural elements. Taoism is just a philosophy. No. That's wrong. And it's the same with Buddhism. People say that about Buddhism all the time. There are philosophical aspects of both of those paths. And you can legitimately be a philosophical Taoist or a philosophical Buddhist where you only take those elements from those religions and apply them to your lives. This is true. But it's wrong to say that Daoism, with a broad brush, is this. Because within the field of religious studies, which is the field I come from, we don't have that. We don't have Daoism or Buddhism or Christianity or Islam. You have Daoisms and Buddhisms and Christianities, because there are so many different aspects. You cannot put everything under one umbrella. There are so many levels of belief. There are Taoist texts that contain supernatural elements. There are Buddhist texts that contain supernatural elements. You cannot just simply say it is this. It is legitimate to say, I myself follow a path of philosophical Taoism, which has no supernatural elements. That is a legitimate thing to say. It's not legitimate to say Taoism contains no supernatural elements. That is incorrect. And on a less serious note, somebody a long time ago in the chat, halfway through the show, put something along the lines of, I saw you, Richard, earlier today at a satanic service. No, you didn't. You will not see me at a satanic service, especially on a Sunday, and especially not outside of the UK. So I don't know who it was, who you saw, who may have looked like me, but I can assure you it was not me. Jimmy Jr., take it away.
Well, I just want to say to whoever said that Richard was the last person to sign in this morning. So all of us hosts were here, and we were waiting on Richard, and I don't know where he went. So look, I want to believe the guy, but we'll just have to see what the future holds. Remember, everybody, the prompt for this week: what's a holy scripture that lives rent-free in your head? Excuse me. Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. Also, I want to give a special thank you to everybody who gives to us on Patreon. If you want to have your name read on the air, then please consider supporting us at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And we are going to go ahead and give out some love rings. Boom. Love rings. Love rings. All right. We are going to continue this on the after show on Discord. And if you're going to, if you're available, please join us there. Remember, everybody, if you don't believe, this is your community, and we appreciate you being here. But if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.